Silksong has just released and many of you that are new to the game or new to the series might need some help. And this is where I come in. My name is Stizzl, I'm a Hollow Knight and Silksong YouTuber, and I'm here to give you 12 absolute beginner tips that will only give you minimal spoilers for the early game. The goal is not to give you some overpowered early game tools or some exploits. The goal is to make you a more aware player, and that these tips that you can use in the early game will be just as important in the late game. So instead of just pointing you towards items that make your character better, I want to make you better, because some of you might not be used to indie or 2D games, so I want to make the introduction to this one as smooth as possible. But I swear that no matter the skill level, there will very likely be at least one useful tip for you here. But now let's start with some basics. Secrets during exploration. Silksong has multiple ways of hiding its secrets from you. First is something players normally ask themselves when starting a Metroidvania. Are there breakable walls? Yes, there are. If you ever see an indentation in a wall or it looks like a path ends just a bit abruptly, hit it with your needle. Takes multiple hits, but normally the sound and feedback from the hit should tell you if you're onto something or on something. But while there are breakable walls, there are also invisible paths behind make-believe walls or shadowy indentations. Sometimes hidden paths are a bit more obvious, and other times, like in the very first room of the game, which by the way like 99% of you missed, it is a bit less obvious. Overall, I've probably stumbled over a dozen secrets like that so far in my journey through Silksong, and some of these secrets have been quite substantial. So yeah, basically these two tips mean that you should probably just throw yourself against any wall you see and try to somehow avoid severe brain damage while doing so. Now these two tips were a bit basic, so let us turn it up a notch. Look out for a sign. I'm not talking about anything divine, but rather signposts or signs that might be attached to something. So if you're low on health and in a bind and you got multiple possible directions to go, following a sign is usually a good way to get around and hopefully get to a bench or wherever you want to go. But there are different sorts of signs. Some are related to higher powers in Falum, and when looking at it, you would not necessarily know what to expect. In this case here, for example, this does lead to a bench, but you would not be able to tell necessarily. So I would especially look out for signs pointing towards A, benches directly, or B, these three stripes, which suggests that the fast travel point is nearby, which is very much not a guarantee for a bench, but you can then always just travel back to Bone Bottom real quick and rest up there. The next tip is also about exploration and about how you move through the kingdom of Falum. Namely, there's no right or wrong way to go. Sure, the early game can be a bit on rails, but you will hit a certain point quite early on where the game truly opens up, and then another as well later down the line, all while still in Act 1. And while there might be a semi-obvious intended path forward, Team Cherry have made sure that every path less traveled is also worthwhile. So you can actually switch around the order of how you go through the areas of the game greatly, so if you somehow find yourself in a hostile area early on and feel like you've hit a wall, you can turn around and go back. But you can also try and persevere. You might have stumbled upon a path that only a fraction of players will take as early as you, so it might lead to a quite unique playthrough. Remember, there is no 100% wrong path. Shops are also important, especially in the early game where money is low and anxiety is high. I myself would suggest that you choose items for exploration over simple health upgrades. This key, for example, can open any simple door, and who knows, maybe you would be able to use it sooner than you might think. Of course, simply upgrading your build is also valid, and I will not in any way blame you if you choose to play that way. Then when it comes to chakra, for example, our map bug, absolutely get the maps and quill and maybe also the compass. These are necessities and also quite cheap. And if you have to choose only one or two, I would definitely first choose the quill and the map for the area you're currently going through. There are also many different ways you can augment Hornet to your liking. Abilities, movement, crests and tools are all at your disposal. My tip here is to try everything once to see what it generally does, but to not feel forced to utilize all of that every time. Sure, the most efficient players are gonna use the abilities and tools that synergize the most and be super effective with it, but other players might just want to stick to their simple, melee focused builds and that's okay. Having more options in combat is great and all, but it also makes things more complex, so while it is probably good in the long run to get accustomed to using everything at Hornet's disposal, it's okay to first get a hold of the basics, especially if you are not used to 2D games, or if you are like me and have a mental bandwidth of about 10 KB per century. So maybe focus on simpler tools first, before using more complex stuff. This next one is about movement in combat, and especially about positioning. Picture yourself during your first try with what is going to be a hard boss. It's a good idea to first stay a bit further away and observe their attacks for a bit, attacking a bit more passively yourself. Bosses don't have infinite attack variations, so after a while you should have seen a decent chunk of the boss's moveset. And since most moves have unique telegraphs before the move actually happens, you can then punish accordingly and get more aggressive over time, and basically one by one learn how to deal with each move and then counter it. Here's where positioning becomes important again, because depending on where you are in the room and how close you are to the boss, some but not all bosses might opt to hit you with more ranged attacks or to close distance you rapidly if you are far away. Many players get hit when they move away from a boss to heal because they don't think that the boss will just get all close and personal suddenly. So instead, heal once a boss has made an attack that has a bit of downtime afterwards. You of course will have to observe the boss previously to know which attack actually has downtime. Also, if you are closing in on the boss might pull out some more close range moves you have not seen before, or will try to parry you. Also, be aware that it is often harder to see what the boss is doing when both you and the boss are basically on top of one another. And be aware of the fact that bosses will also change the way they approach the fights depending on where you are positioned. So yeah, positioning and anticipating attacks is key. Another thing that people often forget about is knockback. Let's say you are fighting a flying enemy like this one. Let's call him Jedediah. Now Jedediah flies towards you and you hit him while standing on this here tiny platform. You get knocked back and fall down. In this case, the fall is only approximately 8 meters and only results in a lot of stress on Hornet's knees, but other situations might be more dangerous. So when fighting certain types of enemies, it is okay to retreat to already conquered larger platforms or jump ahead a bit so you can deal with the knockback better and also evade attacks better by standing on a larger platform. On the other hand, when Hornet herself is hit, she also gets knockback, but it is kind of reduced when compared to Hollow Knight. And this can lead to melee enemies hitting you twice in short succession, one time by punching you in the mask and the other by you still standing inside them until the mere contact with the bug hurts you again. Again, this ties back to positioning. So if you're a Hollow Knight veteran asking yourself why you're getting hit so much in Silksong, the lack of knockback might be something you are not used to and that you have to watch out for. Moving on, the first ability you unlock is called the Silk Spear. And while the power discrepancy between it and the base damage of Hornet's normal attack might not be as large as the counterparts of both in Hollow Knight, I still reckon that the Silk Spear does about 3 times as much damage as a normal hit. So use that to your advantage, especially when you have already hit an enemy a bit and think they might only take 1 or 2 more normal hits, but it is not a get out of jail free card. You will have to balance the Silk Spear and healing. So if you are low on health, I would prioritize the healing especially early on. But if you're at full health and at full silk, then most definitely use the Silk Spear to skewer some pilgrims and make a Moshom original shish kebab out of them. Because if you do nothing while having full silk, then you're doing something wrong. Now these next tips are, I think, the most interesting tips, namely tips regarding story and quest related progression. Before we move on though, please consider subscribing. Only a bit above 10% of you are subbed, and if that were to go up, I would be able to make more videos like this and also try to make them better and better and better each time. Also, please consider looking at my $1 per month Patreon and consider hyping. It's like this new thing on YouTube Mobile that is free for you to do, and YouTube actually doesn't really tell me what it does, but I think it's probably unbalanced and totally overpowered, since that is the case with every new YouTube function ever. So please go ahead and do that so we can abuse it. Anyway, now back to the video. The first lore related tip I'm calling the talk and talk again. Now Silksong is one of those games where as you prompt a character to talk, they might not reveal their full dialogue at first. so make sure to always exhaust dialogue, aka by talking and then talking again until the sentence your conversational partner utters repeats itself. The thing with this one and the other 2 tips to follow is that by getting more dialogue you might understand the lore or the world better, and you might just learn more about the character and about what to expect from them going forward. Can you trust them? Do they want something from you? Where will they go next? All that kind of stuff. The next one is the talk and walk and talk again. So especially some merchants in this game seem to have 2 different ways you can talk with them. One is the normal shop version of the vendor, where they will greet you and then get straight to business, and the other is the one that some of you may miss. So talk with the vendor, then walk to their side and talk again. This way they will talk about more random stuff, maybe something about this area, the city you are in, or just about their private life or characters close to them. Lastly and most importantly for this game, we got to talk in progress and talk again. Sometimes certain characters that you have met in the early game will update their dialogue either after you have completed parts of the game, parts of a specific quest, or most interestingly, after getting specific items. So if you ever come across a character that seems mysterious, that seems like they know more than they let on, maybe come back later again and see if the character has something new to say. That is a great way to get super specific lore bits that will fuel the discussion for months and months on end. And additionally, and probably more importantly for the general audience, this also extends into the towns themselves. New quests may become available, or you may start feeling some visible changes barge their way into familiar places, and thus change the towns forever. That's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. I want to be one of the essential channels when it comes to Silksong content, so maybe stick around if you enjoyed this video. Thanks also to all my Patreons and channel members, Ido, Jake, Nad, Alex, Ara, Cherie and Red Devil. And also thanks to Joseph, Nix, Carver and Ross for providing the Silksong copies for the giveaways I am doing in my 100% playthrough of the game. Many of you have joined recently and I'm very grateful to have you on board. Anyway, let me know if you want a part 2 with a bit more advanced tips, or if you want a video about something specific about Silksong, and I will see you soon. Bye Panada.